Good morning, everyone. This is Jeffy Kennedy, author of fantasy romance and romantic fantasy, here with my first cup of coffee. It's good. Damn it, it's always good. Today is Thursday, April 29th. It's been a funny week for me. Like yesterday, I was convinced it was Thursday. And then I said to one of my friends, I know that today is your therapy day, and she said, no, Tuesdays is my therapy day. And I was like, oh, how does one keep track? One does not. Clearly, one does not. So I've read her coffee today. Um, and I'm hoping to get some words in before I go to that, but I am not as early on schedule as I thought I would be. You know, some mornings you move fast and some mornings you move slow. Sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug. So, as I was watching Zencaster do the countdown for to start this, it does like a 3, 2, 1. I was realizing that my mind was a blank. I don't know what I'm going to say today. Of course, that doesn't normally stop me. All right, well, let's see. Where are things at in my life? I have no idea. I've been working hard on Bright Familiar, and I do have my count up. Oh, I'm at 24,000 words. Oh, I don't want to do that. Ugh, accidentally hit the Zoom icon. We don't want to start Zoom as well as Zencaster. Yeah, so I'm just past 24,000 words, which means I am near the Act 1 climax. If it were going to be 100,000 words like I predicted, it is looking like it's going to be more like 116,000 words, which would put my Act 1 climax 27,000 words, and it's still not going to be what I thought it was going to be. And I was tempted even to look at some beat sheets because I know that there is a part of story structure where there is assemble the team. And I don't remember if it's part of the hero's journey. It might be. Have I talked about my whole thing with the hero's journey? Maybe that's what I should talk about today. Story beats, hero's journey, etc. That actually sounds like a professional podcast as opposed to me gabbing at you over coffee. Let's do earrings first. You will notice, if you are on video, that I am wearing asymmetrical earrings. Today is Asymmetry Day at First Cup of Coffee. And I was amused by those of you who commented that you indeed were not here for the sports metaphors. It's good. It's very important to have a strong brand. And for me, sports metaphors are not it. All right. So this earring is a long piece of pink coral, long vertical pink coral. And you will have noticed a theme if you've been watching faithfully, as many of you do. I love long vertical earrings, but they also have a tendency to snag in my copious hair, and I tend to lose one. Always one. It's like this karmic thing, like I don't know. For want of a nail, my horse lost a shoe and I lost a kingdom in a previous life. I don't know what it is. If you guys can figure out what my one earring karma is, I would be appreciative because clearly this is something like I need to adjust in my beingness, and I don't know what it is. So anyway, here is a single piece of long pink coral. It's a little bit uneven, and I love it for that. I bought this in Virgin Gorda at near the Baths. David and I stayed in these great, what would you call it? It was a great resort, but it was called the Guava Berry Huts, and so we had our own little hut, our own little sort of casita type thing, and we could hike walk there to a restaurant, from there to a restaurant, which served an amazing breakfast overlooking the ocean and everything. And then the hiking trail down to the baths was right there. And we would walk down there. And there was a couple who had a little booth there. And I bought these earrings from them. And actually, I take it back. I have not lost the other one. One broke in half. I dropped it on my brick floors. And so I still have the two pieces. And I tried gluing it together, but that coral didn't effectively glue together. And so sometimes I've worn like the half coral, but that looks weird. This from the woman of asymmetry. Somehow that is like more asymmetrical than I can stand. This earring is a simple silver chain with a little pearl on the end. I don't think it's a real pearl. It's not a real pearl. The teeth thing really does work. A real pearl will feel gritty against your teeth, and it doesn't hurt the pearl to do that. I've gotten people to test it before. So this has just this one's kind of cool. I think I've had this since like college. I had several earrings like this in college that I liked, but it just has a simple straight end. So you just put it into your pierced hole and then just draw the chain through. And so you can adjust it. You can adjust it up and down. And I remember in college, I had a friend named Benjamin Barnett. He's still my friend. If you are out there, Ben, we haven't talked in a long, long time. But Ben had an earring like this. And it was like I can't remember. He wore it all the time, though. Just one in one ear. That was an 80s thing. We did that. Or the boys did that. But it's kind of cool because you can fidget with it. And he said, yeah, it's like having sex in your ear. And it is kind of. So, yeah. And you may also note, those of you on video, that I'm wearing a pendant today since I'm dressed to go out in public. And here's another crescent moon. I know I've had this since college because for Gamma Phi Beta sorority, I was always buying crescent moon things. You will notice that because I believe that's the correct orientation, not reversed, not mirrored on the video, as you guys have told me before. So this is not the waxing. Oh, the gods are speaking. Hold on. Or there's just like a little bit of a gap in my clasp. Anyway, it's a waning moon, not a waxing moon. So it would, if you guys heard my rant about that before, that Gamma Phi wants us to only use the waxing moon because only growth is valued. It's a good thing that happened here because I would have been sad if I lost it. I put this on a slightly different chain because the chain I'd had it on was too short and it had the pendant like up here, right at my neckline. And it wasn't quite right. I mean, you'd think if it was like right here, it would be fine. But it was kind of like here. So I put on this longer one. But I need to squeeze that. Whatever you call it, the little loopy holder dealy. As a writer. So anyway. So I think I did not rant to you guys. I ranted to other people. But if you were part of the Jack Williamson lectureship, which I doubt you were because there were not that many people at it. This is something that's held by Eastern New Mexico University down in Clovis, New Mexico, which is near the Texas Panhandle, honoring Jack Williamson, who was a writer of science fiction. And there were, a couple of days. Normally it's like an in-person gathering that I'd actually never been to. I was supposed to go last spring and it was canceled. This year they had it online. So I participated in a panel for it, listened to the meet and greet and that sort of thing. And so anyway, ahead of time, they sent me the list of panels. And this is always a funny thing because all the panels were like science fiction based, which I don't write. I write fantasy. And there are these people who are always like include fantasy in with science fiction. And they'll say, "Oh, well, when I say science fiction, I mean fantasy too." And I'm like, "Oh, so when you say men, do you mean women too? Are you one of those?" It's one of my things. So it was funny because all these panels were science fiction, except for one that was on diverse voices, which I felt like I'm not going to be on that panel because I don't need to be putting my voice into that conversation. So there was one that was titled Goodbye Space Opera, are superhero movies taking over for the traditional space opera, or movies that are dark romantic fantasies like The Shape of Water. And so when I replied, I'm like, none of these are topics that I can really speak to, except maybe the space opera one, since I do write dark romantic fantasy. So if that's what it's going to be about, then I could be on that. So I ended up being on the panel, which in the schedule they just called Space Opera. And it was me, Walter John Williams, who does write space opera, and has a wonderful space opera series, Steve Gould, who writes wonderful space opera, um, and why am I blanking on who the other person was? Oh, Jim Kelly, who was one of the guests of honor and uh, a very important volunteer in SEFWA. Jim Kelly writes science fiction too. And there was another guy who was supposed to be on the panel, and I can't think of his name at all. And he ended up being late, and then he chimed in a few thoughts at the end, which were really great. So we did our introductions, which included why are we on the panel, and I even said why, like I just explained to you guys, and I said, so I hope we get to talk about that. Well, the moderator just like was clearly not interested in extracting any kind of information from us. And like I said, this is, I haven't been to this event before, so it could be that this is just how it works, because all she did was read us questions from the audience on the chat, which we could actually see ourselves, but I guess that's always nice. So all we did was answer questions, which means that I don't know. I hate when I'm on a panel where it's like nobody wants to hear what I have to say. I actually have nothing to say and I feel like I'm alone. So if I did have something to say, I did try to insert it. And so at one point, somebody asked, because all we were doing was answering questions, if a space opera was essentially the hero's journey in space, would that be a good way for a newbie writer to approach it? And Walter John Williams spoke to that some. Uh, and then I said, actually, I have thoughts on that. And I talked a little bit, as I've talked on here, about how that science fiction and fantasy are more settings, are the ambiance or the milieu, and you could take pretty much any plot structure and set it there. You can do, a literary plot structure and put it in space, or a mystery in space, or if you want to do hero's journey, you can. But and Walter John chimed in, and I felt this is recorded and all this, so I feel like I'm not speaking out of school. But Walter John said, well, the thing about the hero's journey is that it has to belong to a young man. And I said, or woman. And he frowned at me via screen, right? And he said, no, he says, there are reasons it has to be a man. And I said, no, it doesn't. and I got kind of mad, and I said, no, you're wrong. I've written the hero's journey and given it to a woman, and I will fight you on this, Walter John. And he and I have known each other for a while, and he is, a very sweet person in a way, but I was like, you were dead wrong. And he got flustered because his point had been that it should belong to a young man instead of an older man. And so I really flustered him by introducing the whole concept that there was another gender that could be involved. And then I was on this was on Friday, and because I ended up going to the Cepha Publications meeting afterwards, which was entirely women except for one guy, except for our managing editor Kevin Wabansi, who's awesome. But so it was Mary Robinette Quall, Michi Trotta, Lauren Snow, Becca Gomez. Um, I feel like I'm forgetting someone, me, but anyway, I told them what had happened, and so they were all equally outraged with me. And then I mentioned it in Slack, in the Southwest Slack. And it's very interesting because we were talking a lot about Star Wars as being the quintessential space opera. And several people told me, and Noah Falstein, it turns out, used to work for Lucasfilms. And he showed us a picture of that in the early um, iterations of Star Wars that George Lucas was toying with making Luke Skywalker be, gasp, a woman. And Noah Falstein even showed us an early bit of artwork that clearly shows a recognizable scene on Tatooine with Luke standing with the twin sons and looking for something. And the Luke figure clearly has breasts. Um, so it was like vindication. But in part of these conversations, we had been going with um, sorry, I lost. I was just noticing I don't have a lot of time left. Um, a bad time to lose my train of thought. So, so in the conversation in Slack where we were talking about hero's journey and that sort of thing, there is inevitably a few people who will try to claim that they do not use story tropes or they do not follow story structure because I don't know, they're just so original. And somebody was saying, well, of course, I never write hero's journey, and if I did, I certainly wouldn't follow it beat by beat, which was my original point to begin with. It's taken me, 15 minutes to get around to my point because I thought, you can use a story structure like Hero's Journey and not follow it beat by beat. And this is something I'm trying to remind myself of in writing Bright Familiar is that story structure can be useful, but it can also be, you can let it confine you. And so I keep wanting to look up, like in regular story structure, when assemble the team happens. If it's before the, within the first act, or if it can happen after. Because generally, I am very strong on this idea that you should have all of the stakes set and characters introduced in the first act. And I feel like this is just not going to happen with Bright Familiar. Uh, I'm not going to be able to get all of the characters introduced or all of the stakes set, I think. And I did much better yesterday. It flowed better because I stopped worrying about it, which I think longtime listeners will know. This is what I always come around to. That after a while, I just stop battling the story and just let it be what it wants to be. Uh, so, basically, and one of the things we were talking about was hero's journey, and some people were bringing up the idea of the heroine's journey and saying, oh, well, that the heroine's journey is more about like personal transformation and looking inward, whereas the hero's journey is uh, looking outward and external conflict. And I was crying bullshit on that idea too, because first of all, I don't like gendering things like that. I'm willing to call it hero's journey. Yes, when I say man, I mean women too. Um, I feel like hero can be a gender neutral word, and let's just make it be. Um, I know I use heroine sometimes to differentiate from hero. Maybe I should stop doing that because I would really, really just prefer if we talk about hero. We could say protagonist, but I feel like hero is a little different. So the journey of the hero is not just about triumphing over external conflicts. It is. It's also about the internal journey, and that's why I find it's a good metaphor for the kind of thing I write, because uh, I think you guys would probably agree that my stories are always about someone having to change, to find something within themselves that they didn't have before, or to let go of something so that they can then do the thing that they need to do. it's always about, looking. I think the hero's journey is always about looking inward and confronting that dark face in the mirror, confronting one's own flaws, confronting one's own fears, and overcoming that. So it is both an internal and an external journey. So um, I don't know. Sometime, if you guys really wanted me to, I could go through the actual hero's journey as delineated by Joseph Campbell. I'm not sure it's useful, um, but I think it's helpful to have kind of those ideas, like of how these metaphors work in our storytelling subconscious. That it's like crossing the threshold and the eventual returning home. So on that note, I'm going to go get to work. I will remind you all that First Cup of Coffee is part of the Frolic Media Podcast Network. You will find more podcasts you love at frolic.media/podcasts. And I will talk to you all tomorrow. Take care. Have a good day. Bye bye.